never thought I'd betray my own husband. But when Sam, his brother, stayed with us that winter, everything changed in a way I never saw coming. It started with cold nights and empty rooms. Mark was always busy, long hours at the office, late dinners with clients, and weekends lost to golf outings. I was alone in this big house in suburban Ohio, just me, and the silence that seemed to stretch forever. Sam, his younger brother, was visiting for a few weeks, just until his apartment got fixed after the storm. He was only 28, full of energy, jokes, and the kind of warmth I hadn't felt in years. At first, it was just friendly. Sam helped me with small things around the house, fixing the leaking faucet, clearing snow off the driveway. He made the house feel less empty. His presence was comforting. I hadn't told Mark how lonely I'd felt, how the years had crept in and left me invisible. I was 52, married for over 25 years, and somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being someone anyone really saw. Sam was different. He listened. When I said things in passing, how hard it was to feel forgotten, how I missed real connection, he didn't judge or brush me off. He nodded, really listened. Days passed, and the lines between family and something else started to blur. I'd catch Sam watching me sometimes, his eyes softer, more searching than before. I told myself it was all in my head. How could it not be? One cold evening, I was making coffee in the kitchen when Sam walked in behind me. We laughed over something silly he'd said, and before I knew it, he touched my arm. It was just a quick brush, but it sent a shock straight to my chest. I pulled away, heart pounding. This isn't right, I thought. He's my husband's brother. But then he said something that broke through the walls I'd built around myself. You don't have to be alone, Lisa. So the next few days were a whirlwind of stolen moments. We'd share coffee in the early mornings, sometimes linger too long in conversation. He started sitting closer on the couch when Mark wasn't home. I hated myself for it, but the warmth Sam gave me was like a lifeline. The house didn't feel so cold anymore. One night, Mark was away on a business trip. Sam and I ended up watching an old movie in the living room. The fire was crackling, and the tension between us was impossible to ignore. He looked at me, really looked, and I knew we were about to cross a line. I'm not proud of what happened next. It wasn't planned or forced, it just happened, like the sudden rush of a storm breaking through a quiet afternoon. We kissed, softly at first, hesitant, like we were testing the water. But then everything inside me that had been aching for years broke loose. I let myself be held, let myself feel something I'd been starving for. In that moment, I forgot the consequences. I forgot Mark, our marriage, the years we shared. Just wanted to feel seen, to feel alive again. Afterwards, everything was different. The house was full of secrets and stolen glances. Sam and I danced around what happened, but neither of us could pretend it hadn't changed us. I could see the guilt in his eyes, but also something deeper. Something like longing. The days that followed were the hardest I have ever lived. Every moment with Mark felt heavy, like I was hiding a burning truth under my skin. I started to question everything. My marriage, my choices, who I was. Was I selfish? Was I desperate? Or was I just human? The morning after that night was the hardest to face. I woke up alone in our big bed, the sheets still warm with memories that I wasn't sure I was ready to carry. The sunlight poured in softly through the curtains, but it didn't chase away the heaviness I felt inside. Mark was still out of town on his business trip. I told myself to act normal, to keep things like they always were. but the silence between the walls was different now, thicker, more suffocating. I moved through the house almost on autopilot, made coffee, fed the dog, glanced at my phone a few times to see if Sam had messaged. He hadn't. I wondered if he was feeling the same storm of confusion I was. Later that day, Sam came down to the kitchen carrying a small box of tools. He looked tired, but his eyes met mine with that same warmth, the one that made me feel less invisible. "I thought I'd fix that squeaky cabinet door," he said, trying to sound casual. I smiled weakly. "Thanks, Sam." He started working quietly, and I sat at the kitchen table, watching him. The way his hands moved over the tools, focused and sure, it reminded me of why I was drawn to him. Not just because he filled a loneliness, but because he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. But guilt gnawed at me. Every time our eyes met, I felt the weight of what I'd done. I was betraying my husband, my life partner, the man I promised to stand by forever. Yet with Sam, I felt something I couldn't explain. It wasn't just physical. It was like he saw the parts of me Mark no longer bothered to notice. The quiet sadness behind my smiles, the fear of fading away into nothingness. That afternoon, when he finished fixing the cabinet, he sat across from me at the table. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then he said softly, "Lisa, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." I nodded, swallowing hard. Neither did I. Days passed in a strange blur. Mark came home, but I couldn't tell if he sensed anything different. We talked about his trip, the kids, the usual things. But inside, I was torn apart. Sam was always around, helping with small chores, sharing a laugh, bringing me coffee in the morning. Sometimes, when Mark wasn't home, we'd sit on the porch just talking quietly. One evening, I found myself resting my head on his shoulder. His warmth seeped into me like a balm for years of loneliness. "I don't know how to stop this," I whispered. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled me closer. "Maybe we don't have to." That moment scared me more than anything else. I knew what we were doing was wrong by every standard I'd ever believed in, but it felt so damn right when I was with him. I was a woman in her 50s craving love and connection, and here was someone who gave it to me without conditions. But the secrecy was killing me, and every time Mark hugged me or asked how my day was, I felt like a liar, and the more I lied, the heavier my heart became. One afternoon, Mark called me from his office, asking if I wanted to meet for lunch. I hesitated. "Sure," I said finally. I could use a break. We met at our favorite cafe, the place where we used to sit for hours, dreaming about the future. But that day, the silence between us was awkward, filled with unspoken things. Mark looked tired, stressed. I wanted to tell him everything. About Sam, about how I felt invisible. But I couldn't. Instead, I smiled and nodded, pretending life was okay. That night, when Mark was asleep, I found myself texting Sam. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." His reply was quick, "Neither do I." It felt like a confession, a secret bond. The house was a pressure cooker of emotions. I was caught between two worlds, the life I'd built with Mark and the unexpected passion I found with Sam. Sometimes, I wondered if Mark even loved me anymore, or if he was just going through the motions. The years had worn us down, and maybe, deep down, we were both too scared to face the truth. Sam, on the other hand, made me feel alive again. His touch, his smile, his presence, they reminded me I still mattered. That one night, Sam and I sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets. The winter wind howled outside, but inside there was a fragile warmth between us. He looked at me, his eyes serious. "Lisa, we need to talk about what this means." I nodded, scared but knowing he was right. "What if Mark finds out?" I whispered. Sam took my hand. then we'll deal with it together. That promise both terrified and comforted me. I was a woman torn between love and desire, loyalty and betrayal, and I didn't know what the future held, only that my heart had already crossed a line it could never uncross. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of stolen moments and sleepless nights. I tried to convince myself I was just caught up in a moment of weakness, a brief escape from a marriage that felt more like a habit than a partnership. But every time I saw Sam, every time he smiled at me or brushed a stray hair from my face, my heart betrayed me with a new kind of hope. One rainy afternoon, Mark was away again on another trip. The house felt empty, colder than usual. Sam came over to help with some repairs. The furnace had been acting up, and I was too scared to call a stranger. He fixed it quickly and then sat down at the kitchen table with me, wiping his hands on a rag. "I don't want this to end," he said quietly. I looked down, afraid to meet his eyes. "Me neither," I whispered. The truth hung between us like the storm clouds outside, heavy and impossible to ignore. But as the days passed, guilt settled deeper into my bones. I hated lying to Mark. I hated the way my own reflection looked back at me, a woman torn in two. One evening, Mark called from the airport. "Lisa, are you okay?" His voice sounded strained, worried. I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, just tired." He sighed. "We need to talk when I get back." My stomach dropped. I knew what he meant. When Mark finally came home, the tension in the house was almost unbearable. I tried to act normal, but every glance, every word felt loaded with something unspoken. One night after dinner, he sat across from me, his eyes searching. "Lisa, what's going on?" he asked softly. I swallowed hard, tears prickling the corners of my eyes. I don't know how to say this," I stammered. He reached for my hand. "Whatever it is, we can face it." That moment was a breaking point. The walls I'd built started to crumble, and all the pain I'd buried rushed to the surface. "I've been feeling so alone," I said, my voice shaking, "like I'm invisible to you, and then Sam, he's been there. He makes me feel seen." Mark's face fell, but he didn't interrupt. "Sorry," I continued. "I never wanted to hurt you." The next days were filled with difficult conversations, tears, and silence. Mark and I both knew our marriage was at a crossroads. Meanwhile, Sam became more distant. The secret we shared was no longer a refuge, but a reminder of what we had to hide. One afternoon, I found myself alone with Sam in the living room. The weight between us was heavy. "I can't keep doing this," I said. He nodded, eyes dark. "Neither can I." That night, I lay awake, torn between the love I once knew and the love I was discovering. I realized that no matter what happened, my life had changed forever. I was no longer the woman who quietly waited for her husband's attention. I had found a spark. Messy, complicated, but real. And now I had to decide what to do with it. The morning after that night, everything felt different. The quiet in the house was thick, almost suffocating. I could hear my own breath, the ticking clock, the distant hum of cars outside. But inside me, there was a storm, swirling confusion, guilt, and a strange new clarity. I didn't know how to face Mark or Sam or even myself. Mark was in the kitchen, making coffee, like nothing had changed. His movements were slow, deliberate, but his eyes betrayed the weight he carried. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. There was an unspoken question hanging between us. Would we pretend, or would we confront the reality that had shifted beneath our feet? That day, I kept thinking about the promises I had made, to my marriage, to myself, to the life I thought I wanted. But the truth was, those promises felt like chains, binding me to a version of myself I no longer recognized. Sam's words echoed in my mind. I don't want this to end. I wondered if he meant us or just the moments we shared, fleeting, secret, but intense. In the late afternoon, Sam stopped by, under the pretense of checking on the house. We sat in the living room, the silence stretching longer than usual. "Lisa," he said, breaking the quiet, "I need to know what you want." I looked at him, searching for answers I didn't have. I don't know," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I want to feel alive again, but I'm scared of what that means." Sam reached out, his hand brushing mine. "Whatever happens, I'm here." That night, Mark and I talked for hours. It was the hardest conversation we had ever had. No accusations, no shouting, just raw honesty. "I've been distant," he admitted, eyes tired. "I thought I was protecting us by burying my feelings, but I was wrong." I nodded, tears streaming. I felt invisible. I needed someone to see me. We didn't have answers. We didn't even know if we could fix what was broken. But for the first time in a long time, we were talking. Really talking. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, some moments filled with tenderness, others with silence so heavy it felt like grief. Sam stayed away, respecting the fragile space Mark and I were trying to rebuild, but the memory of him lingered, a bittersweet ache. One evening, I found myself alone on the porch, staring at the stars. The cool night air brushed against my skin, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of peace. I realized life was messy, full of mistakes, pain, and unexpected beauty. I wasn't the perfect wife, the perfect woman. I was just me, broken, hopeful, and learning to live again. As I turned to go inside, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sam. "No matter what happens, I'm grateful for you, for us." I stared at the screen, my heart aching with a mix of sorrow and gratitude. Some stories don't have neat endings. Sometimes the line we cross changes everything, but it also teaches us who we really are.